We are on, and welcome everybody. Welcome Ambassador Domenach. And this meeting is on the record. We're being live streamed, so even if we wanted to keep it off the record, our chances are low. However, at the end, 45 minutes in, the ambassador has very graciously agreed to take questions in the room. We will cut off the video feed, and that part of the meeting will be off the record, and the audience is welcome to ask whatever questions you would like. And those of you who are watching on video, just realize you're missing the heart and soul of the meeting, and so next time, come on down here and see it in person. Ambassador Muriel Domenach has been, am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's correct, Domenach.
Domenach. Mm-hmm. Ambassador Muriel Domenach has been serving as permanent representative of the French delegation to NATO in Brussels since September 2019. Prior to this position, Ambassador Domenach served as Secretary General of the Interagency Commission for the Prevention of Crime and Radicalization from 2016 to 2019, as Consul General of France in Istanbul from 2013 to 2016, as well as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Strategic Affairs and Deputy Director of the Policy Planning Staff in Paris. Prior to her diplomatic career, Ambassador Domenach studied at the Paris Institute of Political Sciences, Sciences Po, was an exchange student at Brown University, and also studied at the College of Europe in Bruges and French National School of Administration. And I believe she also knows Ben Haddad, who is a former Hudson Fellow, who is now quite active in Europe in French affairs as a member of the National Assembly, and recently was married. So let me begin. I'm Walter Mead. I'm a fellow here at Hudson, and I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to speak with Ambassador Domenach. So let me start and just ask, what's your view of the current state of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Thank you, Walter, and hello everyone, online and here. What a treat to be addressing such a distinguished audience. Let me just share with everyone that I've been here since the beginning of the week with my NATO colleagues at the invitation of our excellent US colleague, Julian Smith, visiting NATO's Command for Transformation, ACT, whose commander was hosted at the Hudson Institute earlier today. And also we've been collectively brainstorming with senior officials of the administration as we are paving the way for the Washington summit next July, the 75th anniversary. Our defense minister, French defense minister Sébastien Lecornu, happens to be in Kiev today, right at the same time as his UK counterpart and also NATO SecGen, pledging enduring support to Ukraine and recognizing that the Ukrainian counter-offensive is actually making progress despite the Russian lines of defense, the absence of air superiority. And this is a courageous fight. They're fighting, and they deserve credit for making progress in a difficult context. The current state of the operations, I think we share views amongst allies that probably many of us would have hoped for more progress in a shorter amount of time. No need to deny this, but the reality is the Ukrainians are making progress in a very difficult context. They are bringing operations closer to Crimea, the Black Sea, and they've been able to push the Russian Navy further and advancing chances of transiting grain, which is, of course, a key challenge. We collectively, and you will have certainly heard that from Secretary General Stoltenberg, praise them for that. I stand ready to answer questions on support and the what and how, and handing the floor back to you, Walter.
Great, thank you. No, that's actually very helpful. And I've certainly been hearing from several sources that next summer's 75th anniversary NATO summit will be a very important moment in the life of the organization. Looking again at the situation in Ukraine, it's almost hard to look anywhere else when we're thinking about the future of NATO and European defense. What kind of a timeline do you see for Ukrainian accession to NATO and maybe also to the EU?
Look, I'll start with my president's speech in Bratislava, 31st of May this year. Many of you might have in mind that France, since that, has been quite vocal in supporting Ukraine's path to NATO membership, as we are also supportive of its path to EU membership. There's been debates, and I expect there still is going to be debates amongst allies and on when, and I would keep those debates for where they belong. I would be lying if I meant to say we have a clear date for Ukraine's accession. I think stating out and loud that Ukraine would join the alliance after the war might be seen as an encouragement to the Russians to keep the war going. But what matters is that the 31 allies collectively at the Vilnius summit last July agreed that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. And I think that commits us all collectively to advancing Ukraine's path to NATO in the framework of a NATO-Ukraine Council, where Ukraine seats, just like the rest of us, by alphabetical order. This council was convened already over summer, will be convened again shortly, and we're preparing with our Ukrainian partners the next steps when it comes to our cooperation and also further integration of our industrial bases, and that's probably where I want to go in the context of my minister's visit to Kiev. Playing the long game now is, as is clear to everyone, that this war is meant to last. We don't see the Russians coming to the table. Playing the long game now and carrying a bigger share of the burden for Europeans means we have to bring our industrial bases with the Ukrainians closer and even initiate co-productions if we are to play the long game.
Yeah, I understand. There have been reports recently that Russia has actually increased its missile and munitions production since the end of the war. while on the NATO side, we do not seem to have matched these increases, and we're feeding from existing stockpiles faster than we can replace munitions. Do you see that changing, that capacity either in Europe or the United States or both is going to be increasing here?
Clearly, Russia counts that they will wait us out, and it's clear that they're very much looking at what's happening here in this country and in this respect, but also they count that they will outproduce us. I won't speak for the Americans, but my understanding from our exchanges is that our American allies, of course, are handling this production challenge seriously. We, as Europeans, have been taking a number of measures to ramp up our industrial potential. We're planning to actually double our production capacity. Only with 155 munitions, the EU Commission is dedicating EU money to the production, not only the transfer of those munitions to Ukrainians, but also the joint production amongst Europeans, and then the ramping up of our industrial capacity. Now, another thing that Minister de Cornu will be initiating in Kiev is the co-production with Ukrainians. We also help maintenance and replenishing in terms of ammunition. So that's going to be a key challenge as we're playing the long game.
Chancellor Scholz has ruled out sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine. At least that was the latest that I've heard. And apparently out of concerns about possible Russian reactions to those. What do you think is the state of European decision-making and coordination at this point?
I won't speak for Germany. As France, we made public at the Vilnius summit our decision to transfer to Ukraine cruise missiles, Scalp-PGs, that are twins with Scalp Shadows. As we were making this transfer public, those missiles were already on theater, and the Ukrainians had been trained already, and maintenance had already been provided. That the sort of whole cycle of training, maintenance, and replenishing has been what we as France have been committed to. You will have read from public reports that those cruise missiles were actually used where they should be. Clearly not within the Russian internationally recognized territory. If I'm thinking, and this is me speaking personally here, of where we were a year ago, probably a lot of people would have argued, isn't that escalatory? And my sense is the escalation parameter is now handled in a totally different fashion. So speaking in my French capacity, I would recognize, of course, that it's any country's sovereign right to either transfer or not transfer. We, of course, coordinated with the UK in this context.
Yep.
And the Americans.
I know before the war began, there was a lot of talk in this country and perhaps also in Europe that that in any potential war in Ukraine, Putin and Russia would have escalation dominance. That is, Ukraine was seen as such a vital interest to the Russians that they would be willing at any point to escalate to a step beyond where the West was willing to go. We now seem to be locked into a conflict in which questions of reciprocal escalation is a very real one. Has this concern about escalation dominance disappeared? Is it affecting our decision making? How do you analyze that situation?
It has definitely not disappeared. It's probably differently factored in our decisions. I would say the parameters that are taken into account are, of course, the relevance for the Ukrainians, also the cost on our arsenal, and the escalation factor probably comes in a different context. And of course, each ally has their own views on escalation, but primarily, I would say, relevance in the operational context and ability to sustain comes first. There's been a lot of focus from public opinions on both sides of the ocean on this or that arms system rather than this or that function. I think now we've come to more thinking in terms of function. Now it's all about the artillery, artillery, ammunition, and as we're again preparing for the long game and coming back to your earlier question on the offensive, this war is gonna stay. Whether we like it or not. So playing the long game is not about, hoping that we will find the magic bullet. It's about, resilience in our own societies and being able to, with the Ukrainians, replenish, maintain, and support their resilience.
At the beginning of the conflict, President Macron seemed to have, at least was reaching out to President Putin, and sort of there was talk of, trying to keep a dialogue going. Is that still an objective from the French perspective, and how is it proceeding?
It was always an objective for France, as I believe it's been in this country, to engage as much as we hoped we would reach. We had a chance to reach an outcome. If one thing, our dialogue with President Putin until the very last minute will have convinced the French public opinion that we've tried everything. And I think President Macron, had President Macron not tried until the last minute, probably the French public opinion would be less supportive now of our strong stance in support of Ukraine. It came to a surprise to many that President Macron, in his Bratislava speech, came out loud and clear that not only do we support Ukraine's EU bid, but also its NATO bid. I think it came naturally after, we tried everything. Occasionally, President Macron engaged with President Putin also with Zaporozhye. And it comes out that, the Russians are not prepared to negotiate. Should they be prepared to negotiate? Of course, our mission collectively is to support Ukraine, make as much gains as possible, so they negotiate in the best conditions possible. Where I have to be very clear, it's that all along those different phases, we never try to say to Ukraine objectives that wouldn't be theirs. Mm-hmm. That is totally false narratives. I occasionally read, accusations towards this administration or towards some Europeans that X or Y has been trying to tell the Ukrainians, guys, right, it's time to compromise. I haven't heard that any of us ever tried to impose on the Ukrainians end goals that weren't theirs. Actually, only the Russians have been trying to do so. And that I know for a fact. Not that I'm paid by this administration, but I have to be frank.
Still on the subject of NATO, but maybe moving at least for a while away from Ukraine, you've had a lot of experience in Turkey and know a country that is of increasing interest and increasing importance in the international situation. Let me just first ask, we've just seen the collapse of the Armenian enclave in Nagorno-Karabakh, and a real change in the situation in the South Caucasus. Is there a French view on what's happening there, and where do you see it going?
I think it's a tragedy from a humanitarian perspective, what's going on in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, as others in the international community, France expects Azerbaijan to provide access to Nagorno-Karabakh and respect Armenia's territorial integrity. That Putin has been meaning to punish the Armenian leadership for taking distance with Moscow leaves no doubt to anyone that it is an issue for the Atlantic security, but also for us collectively is clear from a French perspective. Now, clearly there's different views amongst allies, and the value of NATO is also to share views where we differ.
Turkey does seem to have, the whole concept of Turkey's ultimate destination being to join the European Union seems to no longer be alive either in Brussels or in Istanbul, in Ankara. The NATO relationship has become much more complex, and in some ways, I think since the fall of the Soviet Union, Turkey has gradually come to feel that it has more room for maneuver with Russia that is a bit of a threat, but maybe less so than the Turks have been used to feeling. Where do you see Turkey's place in NATO and relations between Turkey and Europe going?
I can only speak of Turkey's place in NATO. I'm not a specialist on Turkey EU relations. I clearly speak from the place of someone that has lived in Turkey, that actually loves Turkey and wishes Turkey and the Turkish people good. So whether there will be some cooperative framework where the EU and Turkey can, also in the context of the European political community that will meet soon in Toledo, I certainly hope this happens from a personal perspective. But again, from a NATO perspective, where I'm more knowledgeable, I realize there's been a lot of questions amongst allies on what it is that, what kind of a relationship Turkey and Russia are entertaining. Some in France mentioned this very specific relation as entente brutale, after entente cordiale.
Yes.
I think from a NATO perspective, again, and that we hear a lot from our Turkish colleagues, they clearly see the interest in countering Russia in Central Asia. And I think when Turkey, even as they are being difficult, no need to deny, on Sweden, I think still they recognize the value of Sweden joining the alliance, also because it would, raise dilemmas for Russia in Central Asia. So probably we should play on that part of, we should play on the brutality side of the entente brutale. Now, I would be lying if I said there's no doubts. Of course there are. But I think NATO is part of the solution. This is an alive and kicking alliance where, the North Atlantic Council serves as a platform where allies can share differences, but also aspirations. And I think where there are doubts on where an ally is heading, the North Atlantic Council and NATO also comes as part of the solution.
Yeah. And I see Hungary has also been expressing a few doubts about Sweden's membership in NATO. Do you think this is easily resolved, or is going to be a difficult problem?
Well, there again, I owe you to be frank. Probably a lot of people underestimated the Hungarian, but also Hungarian-Turkish nexus in this context. We would take the Hungarian authorities at their word, as they claimed that Hungary would not be the last ally to ratify Sweden's accession. So hopefully Hungary would be on board soon. I have to insist, though, that how much Sweden's accession means in terms of alliance posture. And also, as we're meeting here in Washington, and there's expectations from our Baltic allies that there's going to be more permanent forces in their countries. Well, Sweden joining the alliance counts hugely when it comes to the defense of the Baltic states. I mean, for obvious reasons, the Baltic states being, kind of a how do you say in English, an isthmus?
Isthmus, yes.
Isthmus. As Sweden would join the alliance, reinforcements from the Baltic Sea would be facilitated. So, it's not, Sweden's accession is not about, just adding a new member to the alliance. It has real effects on deterrence and defense. And as allies are limited in the forces that they can actually deploy permanently in those countries, having Sweden in makes a huge difference.
There has been some talk, I know, and as you mentioned, of having larger NATO deployments in the Baltics and farther to the east in response to what's been happening with Russia. Do you think French troops or French forces would be part of that expanded presence?
This is being discussed as a part of the regional plans that, the new plans that were approved in Vilnius. French troops have been deployed in Estonia, so land troops, and we've been doing air policing for the 3 Baltic states. I certainly expect us to contribute to whatever will be decided amongst allies. Now, as you might know, we took the leadership of NATO's presence in Romania. With over 1,000 troops. Also, we deployed air defense near the Black Sea. So, yes, clearly will be part of what's being discussed, with very much in mind, as I said, the sustainability of our forces, and there again, that if we are to talk of the defense of the Baltic states, there again, Sweden's accession will make a huge difference, as Finland's accession already made a difference.
Now, when we talk of Russia's malign activities in the world in recent years, clearly one of their most successful initiatives has been the use of Wagner forces to create really almost a neo-colonial Russian empire in the Sahel and in areas where formerly French influence was considered very significant. What are the thoughts in Paris about how to counter what's been happening in Africa and to prevent Putin from consolidating power over really what is a quite strategic swath of territory from a European point of view?
Right. Look, there's no point denying that what's happening in the Sahel is terrible for those populations with jihadists taking over more territory in those countries where, at the request of those governments, French forces, also with allies and partners, managed to push them back. Now, we had to make decisions to withdraw forces where they were no more desired. I think it's a well-known story that of forces that are praised. You might remember French forces in Mali in 2013, praised as liberation forces as they kept Tombouctou and then even Bamako in Mali from falling to the hands of the jihadists. Now, clearly, at some point, we were not accepted anymore. There's no point, challenging this reality. We are doing a lot of work to counter Russian narratives, to expose facts on what it is that they're doing to civilian populations, what it is that they're doing in terms of a predatory activities, what it is that they're doing just covering regimes rather than supporting populations. We're also working on counter-narratives in a NATO context. But I think this is a reality we are facing, that we have to evolve in the ways we are operating in this part of the African continent. Interestingly, the French cooperation with other parts of the African continent has been tremendously evolving. I'm not a specialist for Africa. I think exposing the Wagners and maybe counting on the benefits of how they were exposed also by the Prigozhin assassination might bring fruits at some point.
I'm thinking if I'm Putin sitting in the Kremlin, what I see is the Ukrainian counteroffensive has stalled. Winter is coming, or at least the autumn rains are coming. Former President Trump is leading in the race for the Republican nomination and is more or less even with President Biden in the polls in the U.S. I've managed to drive the French out of large part of Africa. My relationship with China is very strong. I'm doing very well in the Middle East with Syria and my relationship with Iran. My munitions production is up. My hold on my country seems to be unchallenged despite the Prigozhin mutiny. Why would Putin think he's losing the war? Can you think of arguments that might persuade Putin that, in fact, NATO is defeating, NATO and Ukraine are winning in Ukraine?
Right. You know what? Authoritarian regimes are not always good at telling. In authoritarian systems, intelligence communities are not always good at telling their authorities the truth. But maybe at some point, some in the Russian system are not hiding to Vladimirovich Putin that he is not winning in Ukraine. He is stalling in Ukraine. They started this war. They're not winning. Ukraine is still alive. He hoped to divide us. We're more united than ever. The Europeans are carrying an increasing share of the burden. European public opinions are holding. And at some point, when it comes to Africa, facts matter. And Africans are realizing whether that makes a difference in the short term. It's not clear that the Wagners probably are not a long-term option. So there's two ways of seeing the picture. But if I were the Russian leadership, and I wouldn't pretend that we have a clear view on what they're telling to themselves, I would not be so sure I'm winning.
Now, there's been obviously, and much of it coming from France, talk of European strategic autonomy and the importance in part in view of the possibility that former President Trump might return and U.S. policy could change, of the importance of building European strategic autonomy. Where would you say that movement stands at this point?
I think the movement of European strategic autonomy is wrongly pictured as one that is meant to compete or replace America. I think it's about us, Europeans, much more than you would think it's about you guys. Mm-hmm. So we wish you the best. Frankly, I would be lying if I meant to say we had no preference in terms of being able to cooperate and ensure an enduring American presence in Europe, but also handling of world affairs. But good luck, guys. We have to prepare for what's best for ourselves. Yep. What's best for ourselves is us being able to design our own strategic interests. And as I see things, and this is where if I were Putin, I wouldn't be too sure that I'm winning, European public opinions are holding. Again, I'm speaking of my own country. Mm-hmm. It's been a steady 60% of the French society, despite everything that was said in support of Ukraine's NATO and EU bids. We're taking an increasing share of the burden. We've overtaken America now. Not that it's a competition, frankly, in terms of support to Ukraine, not only militarily, but also financially and resilience-wise. So what it is that we're doing for ourselves. Now, of course, there's different views and different perspectives within the European Union, no need to deny. But on the whole, that this ammunition initiative was brought by the Estonian Prime Minister, I think, speaks for where we stand as Europeans.